In this chapter, we will show you a world-class technique that allows you to work with large quantities of data in a flexible and effective way. We already know what slicers are and how to insert them. This is the right time to see how they can be applied in practice and improve the reporting of any firm. In this exercise, we will consider a company called Drinko, operating in the fast-moving consumer goods industry. The FMCG industry involves the production and sale of non-durable goods, such as soft drinks, toiletries, processed foods, and other consumable goods, and is a business known for its high volumes and relatively low margins. Usually, there are a number of firms competing for market share, and this makes financial transparency and insight even more critical. Companies want to understand which are their most profitable products, which packages of these products are preferred by clients, and what is the optimal size clients prefer to buy. Furthermore, they typically operate with a number of key clients and need to find out which is the best course of action on a case-by-case basis. Drinko is a soft drinks producer. Our goal here will be to build a model that allows the company management to see the volumes that were sold, the revenue, and margins that were obtained, and provide a breakdown per month, client, client type, brand, size, and pack. These are the important indicators that need to be analyzed in order to understand whether the company can improve its product offering. The spreadsheet you see on your screen represents a data extraction that is typically obtained when working with the so-called ERP systems, standing for Enterprise Resource Planning. These are integrated software solutions that a company uses in order to collect, store, and manage data from its business activities. Therefore, ERP systems are data warehouses, something like a container that collects the entire information of a firm. The two most popular ERP system providers in the world are Oracle and SAP. The extraction has been made in SAP's Business Objects application. Business Objects is a tool that allows you to extract data that has been stored in the system. The data is naturally downloaded and used in Excel by the firm's financial analysts. As you can see, every row of the extraction contains specific descriptive and financial information. In the left part of the sheet are the so-called descriptive fields, showing descriptive information, like material number, description, the period when this occurred. Then we have the relevant brand, size, pack, client, and client type. On the right side is all the financial information we will need in this exercise. It starts with volume, the amount that was sold per each of these lines. In our first example, this shows that 206 units of Crocky 250 milliliter 4-pack were sold in Kroger supermarkets in January. In the same way, going to the right, we have gross sales and discounts. It is a common practice that clients receive different discounts based on the amount of business they generate. If we then consider the discounts that had been given to clients, we will arrive at net sales. At the right side of the table, we have three additional cost items: cost of goods sold, distribution, and warehousing expenses. Quite intuitively, cost of goods sold shows you how much was spent in order to produce the product. Distribution and warehousing are two items that are often grouped together. Distribution is the transport expenditure that has been sustained in order to deliver a product to a client, while warehousing indicates the cost for keeping the item in the company's warehousing facilities. The extraction we see here is 88,000 rows and expands across 15 columns. This is a lot of data, which makes the file's size a little bigger. Too big Excel files are slower, difficult to work with, and crash very often. Complicated Excel functions are a potential liability in these scenarios. Therefore, we will have to use another instrument in order to obtain a file that is easy to work with and does not crash. Right, we had a great introduction so far. Let's start the actual work. Before diving into the data, we should always take a moment and think whether we have everything we will need for our analysis. For instance, in this case, we can see the period column merges the year and month when the transactions occurred. If we separate them, it will be easier to manipulate the data. Let's do that. I will insert two new columns in the left side of the sheet. One of them will contain months, and the other one will contain years. Fortunately for us, the column we want to split contains 6 digits at all times. The first 4 show the year, and then the last 2 show the month when the transaction was registered. So it is very easy to split years and months. All we have to do is use the right and left functions, and we will be able to separate months and years in no time. I'll type right in the first new column, and we'll select the cell where years and months are merged. The second argument of the function is the number of characters we want to obtain. In this case, we're interested in getting the last 2 characters that stand on the right. Hence, I will write 2. OK. For the second column, we'll need to use the left function and proceed in the exact same way as before. Select the cell that merges months and years and specify the number of characters we want to obtain. In this case, it will be 4, given that the years are shown in the first 4 characters on the left. Let's copy these 2 cells and paste them for the entire table. This allows us to have the month and year when every transaction occurred in separate cells. Hi, and welcome back. So far in our exercise, we have mainly focused on the source sheet. In this lesson, we will start working on the output that we will try to produce. As we already have an idea of what data we have extracted from SAP, it will be pretty easy to create a structure of the report we will build. So, the first thing we can say for certain is that we have 2 years of data, 2015 and 2016. Let's add 2 separate columns in which we will have data for 2015 and data for 2016. One of the most important drivers for FMCG businesses is volumes sold. And although volume isn't a financial measure, I would suggest putting it on top of our report. I will leave a blank row and will add gross sales income, which shows the revenue of the company before it provides discounts to its clients. That's why we'll have to add discounts. As we already said, gross sales income minus discounts equals net sales. Net sales is the amount of sales that actually goes into the company's bank account. This is the primary sales figure reviewed by analysts when conducting a financial analysis. If we subtract the cost of goods sold from net sales, we will obtain gross profit, which is a preliminary profit measure that shows how much a business makes after taking into consideration the cost of the products that it sells. There are 2 other cost items that we have in the source sheet: distribution and warehousing expenses. Let's add them to our structure. OK, very well. This gives us full delivered margin, a profitability measure that is typical for the FMCG industry, showing how much profit a firm makes when it takes into account the cost of production, warehouse, and transportation for its products. And that's it for now. These are the fields that we will try to populate in our next lessons. Thank you for watching. We always want to make a great first impression to the people who use our files, and the best way to do that is by applying good-looking formatting. It makes our reports both clear and easy to understand. Let's start by coloring the whole sheet in white. I will use the Ctrl+A shortcut in order to select the entire sheet, and then color it in white. And while all cells are selected, we can change the font of all cells to Arial and assign them a font size of 9. That's perfect. Cell B1 will contain the title of the sheet. We will call it FDM Sales and Volume Analysis. Let's change its font size to 12 and apply the following font color. This is a custom color that we can use for the purposes of this exercise. I would also like to put the title in bold. That's excellent. Now, let's move ahead. The top row of the report will contain information about the unit of measurement that we're using and about the year we're in. Let's color it in a distinctive color and change the font color of these cells to white. I will also put them in bold. Very well. Now we'll add a few borders in order to distinguish the various subtotal and total lines. The two subtotals are net sales and gross profit, while the total line that we have is full delivered margin. By formatting the total line in a different way, we are emphasizing it in a stronger way. This different formatting looks good, right? Okay, our next task will be to reduce the size of the rows that separate volume and gross sales numbers. Let's reduce the size of these rows to 3.75. This is much better. Later on, when we are ready with the numbers, we will most likely be interested in calculating their absolute and percentage variations. So let's create two columns where we will be able to do that. I will reduce the size of this first column to leave some empty space, and then copy and paste the formatting of one of the columns that we have on the left. I will change the color of all cells to gray, and change the title that we have above, indicating that in these columns we've calculated the absolute and percentage variance of the items that we have on the left. I will also change the font color of this title to green. Very well. Let's reduce the font size of the numbers that will be here. I'll use a font size of 8. As we've already seen, it is very common to include KPIs, key performance indicators, below reports like this one. Here we can calculate a few ratios that provide additional insight into the analysis we are making. I'll color this area in gray, and we'll reduce the font size of the cells to 8. Let's indicate that here we will calculate KPIs. I'll just type KPIs. I'm sure you'll agree that the sheet looks much better compared to what we had at the beginning of this lesson. Hi guys! In this lesson, we will add several formulas that will ensure, once we start populating the sheet with data from the database, everything will be calculated perfectly. Firstly, we can start by adding formulas that calculate each of the total and subtotal lines. I will add a formula that sums gross sales and discounts here. And then, below, I'll add another formula that calculates gross profit. These are the two subtotal lines. We'll have the same thing for full margin delivered. It will be the sum of gross profit, distribution, and warehousing. Very well. Now I'll copy these formulas and use paste special formulas in order to paste them for 2016. Okay, great. The other formulas we need to include are the ones located on the right. Here we have two types of variation calculations, absolute and percentage. The absolute variation is just the simple difference between the value that was observed in 2016 minus the value in 2015. We can calculate percentage variations by dividing the quantity that was observed in 2016 by the quantity we have in 2015 and subtracting 1. Good. Now we can paste the two formulas for the rest of the cells. The next step will be to include a few KPI ratios and prepare their formulas. For example, it will be interesting to see what percentage of net sales will be gross profit and FDM. Let's do that now. I'll type the formulas for these KPIs here. And when the numbers are included in the sheet, the two formulas will be calculated directly. This is how we perform a preliminary preparation of our report sheet. In our next lesson, we'll create a pivot table that is going to serve as a source for this report. That's all for now. Thank you for watching. Hi guys. In this lesson, our task is to create a pivot table that is going to serve as a source for our report. This is something that you already know how to do, but let's practice it one more time to be sure. I'll open the sheet where we have all of our source data, and we'll select all the data on the sheet. Then I'll click on the Insert tab, which will allow me to insert a pivot table in a new worksheet, which is exactly what we want to do here. Let's think of the structure of our pivot table. We want it to show all the data we have in the source sheet in a particular way. Let's add the year field to the table's columns area. This will separate the data for the 2 years. We can also do that for the month field, placing it below year. Then, I would like the rows of the table to show the quantity we had for each of the brands in our database. That's why I'll drag the field brand, and we'll put it in the rows area. Perfect. This is what our table will look like. All we have to do is populate it with some data. I'll select each of the fields that we have here: volume, gross sales, discounts, net sales, cost of goods sold, distribution, and warehousing. As you can see, everything that we'll need was added to the values area. Our pivot table is now ready. Stay tuned for the next lecture, which will show you how we can populate the whole report with a single formula. Right, let's summarize what we have seen so far in this exercise. We started working with a raw SAP extraction in Excel. We carried out a mapping exercise and obtained 2 new columns, one containing months and another one showing years. Then we were able to build a structure based on the data we had in our extraction and on what we wanted to show in the report we are building. After that, we formatted the output sheet nicely and added the necessary formulas that will calculate subtotal, total, absolute, and percentage variances, etc. Finally, we inserted a pivot table that will allow us to extract the necessary numbers. The next 2 lessons will make working with pivot tables so much more valuable for you. Our goal here is to extract the data from the pivot table and populate the cells of the output sheet. Let's start by filling the first cell in the report: volume for 2015. I'll link to one of the cells of the pivot table that we already have. We already know how getPivotData works. The first argument shows the field for which we are extracting data. In this case, we are extracting data for volumes. The second argument, which in this case is cell A3, is the first cell of the pivot table to which we are linking. And then, all of the other arguments of the function give us directions to which cell exactly in the pivot table we are linking. Let's take a look at the formula while we are in the sheet containing our pivot table. We have month equal to 1, meaning we are extracting volume data for January. The year is 2015, and the brand is Buratino. You can now see how easy it is to understand this formula. Each of the names has an easy-to-understand meaning. Sometimes we can even work with this function without looking at the source sheet. And this is simply great, as it reduces the likelihood of mistakes significantly. But that's not everything. We can substitute each of these hard inputs with a reference. And this is when getPivotData becomes awesome. For example, I will copy the 2015 in this row here, and will then replace the hard input with a reference to this cell, and everything will remain as it was before we had made the replacement. This is how we can make the function flexible and reuse it for the rows and columns in the entire table. I will simply copy the 2016 on the right. Copy and paste the function to the right, and this will provide us the volume in 2016. Very well. But wait, these are not the volumes of all the firms we want to show here, but just the ones for the Buratino brand. If we erase this criterion, we will stop specifying we are looking for a particular brand, and Excel will provide us with the sales volume of the entire company. And in the same way, we need to eliminate the month field, as right now the formula extracts volumes only for January. I'll erase these two parameters of the function. Okay, so this is the volume of sales of the entire firm in 2015. And we have already specified the numbers are in thousands. Let's divide this figure by 1,000. It will look much neater. All right, the question is, are we going to be able to paste this function in all blank cells that have to be filled in this report? The answer is that we are not ready to do that yet. I'll need to fix the row reference of the year item, which will prevent it from changing its location when pasting the function downwards. The other thing that needs to be taken care of is the fact we still have one hard input at the beginning of the function. Its first argument, which reads sum of volume. We need to find a way to allow us to change this argument for each of the rows we have below. So, for example, when we paste the function in the row below, the first argument will have to be sum of gross sales, because this is how it is named in the pivot table from which we are extracting data. So why don't we substitute this bit with an ampersand function? I can separate the first part with parentheses, which indicates this is text, and then add the ampersand function and link to the cell. And here's the proof that this approach functions. The first argument of the function will change dynamically when we paste it downwards and to the right. However, we forgot to add a $sign in front of the column reference of this agreement. Without the $sign in front of it, it will change its column position when pasting to the right. I'll add the $sign now. All right, perfect. Now we can paste the function for all blank cells in our report. getPivotData is truly great, isn't it? One of the most frequent questions we have received from people who reached this part of the course is related to an Excel bug, which makes it a bit difficult to make getPivotData functions dynamic. The idea is that we substitute getPivotData's hard references with cell references from our table in order to make the getPivotData function dynamic. However, the problem many people encountered was that when they substitute a year with a cell containing that year, Excel displayed a ref error. The reason for this is that Excel doesn't recognize the formatting of the cell that has been provided as a reference for the getPivotData function. Let's go ahead and copy the year from the pivot table. I'll paste it right into our table. And voila! getPivotData functioned. Now we can easily adjust the cell's formatting to what it was earlier, while the function continues to work. This is the fix for this problem, and it works like a charm. Hopefully this is helpful and saves you some time. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, we've made great progress so far. our report is populated and we are ready to take it to the next level. The next step we are going to take is to add slicers. This is one of our favorite new features in Excel, and in this video, you'll see why. Slicers are visual filters. When using a slicer, you can filter the data in a pivot table by clicking on the type of data you want. And the best part is that you will see what you have selected. When combined with Get Pivot Data, as we have done here, slicers become a really powerful tool, allowing you to create the most comprehensive reports, which executives will ask you to do. You will be ready beforehand with any tweaks they request. So, let's see how we can add slicers in practice. We have to open the sheet containing our pivot table. So, click on one of the cells of the pivot table, open the Insert tab, and select Slicer. The dialog box that appears allows us to select the variables for which we would like to add a slicer. So, let's see. What do we need? I will select Month, Brand, Size, Pack, Client, and Client Type. This should be enough for the needs of our report. Let's click OK, and boom, here are our slicers. Let's select all of them contemporaneously by holding the Shift key and then use Ctrl and X in order to cut and paste them into our output sheet. Okay, that's perfect. Now I'll have to play around with the slicer's size in order to improve the way they fit on the sheet. Remember, we want this to be a nice report that displays everything in one page and doesn't need additional scrolling. The users of the report will be able to see what's displayed on the left side and which filters have been applied through the slicers. That's amazing, right? Let me provide you with an example. If I want our report to display only figures for the Buratino brand in January, I'll make the following selections. And yes, now it shows numbers reflecting only Buratino's performance in January. By following this logic, we can build reports at the speed of a single click, which is probably comparable to the speed of light. In our next lesson, we will learn how to enhance the appearance of slicers, so they appear the same as the report that we have on the left. All right, great! Our task in this lesson is to learn how to improve the formatting of the slicers we have inserted, and make them appear nice, keeping in mind the layout we have on the left side. So, let's do the following. I'll select all the slicers. I'm holding the Shift key while doing it. And we'll open the Options tab, which is available only after we have selected at least one slicer. Here, we can select this tiny arrow, showing more options. And it would allow us to create a new slicer style. All right, in the dialog box that opens, we can see a list of elements that determine how the slicer looks when a certain event occurs. When an item is selected and it contains data. When an item is selected and it does not contain data. When an item is not selected and contains data. When an item is not selected and does not contain data. And so on. You can spend a lot of time to improve these settings. Let me show you how it's done in our case. First, let's apply borders to the slicers we have. This brings up the usual formatting dialog box we have seen before. We can use a light gray color. Then we can click on Select Item with Data and change the fill color of selected items with data to the green we've used for the entire report. This synchronizes the colors within the sheet and it appears much more professional. And change the font color to white. I will also put them in bold. Our next task is to determine how unselected items with no data would appear. I'll select this element and click Format. It's okay for these elements to be almost transparent. A gray or white fill is appropriate, given they are not selected, and it should be clear for the user this is an element not currently displayed. These modifications are fine for now. Let's click OK and see the slicer's appearance after the changes we've made. Looks good, doesn't it? Once we make a selection, the selected items appear in a certain way. In this case, all selected cells continue to be green. The unselected items are gray, as you can see here. If I remove the filter, all elements become green, which is exactly what should happen. Our report looks awesome. In the next lesson, we'll look at it and discuss its applications. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. All right, great. We've built a report and filled it with numbers. We've formatted it nicely, and we added slicers. We've done everything we had to do. In this lesson, we will look at the report and try to imagine how it will be used in a real-life working environment. Our report shows the numbers that Drinko achieved in 2015 and 2016. It provides information about the volume sold by the company and the margins with which it operated. But let me ask you a question. Do you think aggregate numbers are useful when we want to analyze what drives performance? They can be useful, but only to a certain extent. If you want to gain an overall understanding of a company's business, then it's probably better to look at aggregated numbers, as the ones we see here. But if instead you would like to understand the reason behind these figures, you will need to open these numbers and dig deeper. This is exactly why slicers can be a world-class solution. They allow us to drill down and play with the numbers, as necessary, in an easy and time-efficient manner. So, for example, on this sheet, we can see Drinko's sales volumes decrease by approximately 7% year-on-year. We don't see what drove the negative performance. Which of the brands owned by the company decreased the most? Let's use the brand slicer to answer this question. Okay, the first brand in the list decreased by 30%. The next one, which is Buratino Orange, decreased by 3%. Then we have Buratino Peach, which grew massively by 170%. Crocky grew too, plus 10%, and so on. You can see how easy it is to find the top and worst performing brands. What will we typically do with this information? We will try to build a story around it and analyze the reasons for larger movements before reporting to top management. They will know we are on top of things if we show them the numbers and accompany this with additional analysis. The additional analysis will be easy to perform because our report is flexible. So, let's say the decrease of Buratino is something we definitely want to look at. We want to understand why its volume decreased by 30%, right? So it will be natural to see which clients stopped buying from Drinko. I will filter for each of the accounts, and it will be easy to find the names of those clients whose numbers showed the highest decrease. Albertsons decreased by 40%. Costco, minus 8%. H-E-B, 44%. Kmart, minus 24%. And so on. After we have a list with problematic client accounts, our story becomes richer. For example, we can report the overall decrease of volume sold was due to the poor performance of several brands. One of them was the Buratino brand, which sold 30% less volume. And these lower sales were mainly driven by Albertsons, H-E-B, Kmart, and so on. This financial and performance transparency is what every general manager dreams of. We hope you have enjoyed this section of the course, and slicers and get pivot data have become one of your favorite Excel tools.